to the end of the year. We appreciate this very much. We wish that we had been able to get this venue from the beginning. They have made it available to us without us having to pay any rent. And therefore, as a commission, we will save quite some money. So I just want to place it on record that we really appreciate the cooperation that they have extended to us and for making this facility available to the Commission. Thank you very much. Mr. Soni?
Mr. Chairperson, in the next few days, perhaps the next 8 days, we will be hearing evidence about PRASA. Before I get into that, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes, I think there is, the sound doesn't appear to be as clear as it should be, and it probably has nothing to do with how far you are from the mic, but it's not as clear as it should be.
Mr. Chairperson, I'm just wondering if is that much better? It sounds a little better from here.
That is better.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe it does require raising your voice a bit.
Yes.
But let's try, and I take it the technicians will be working on the problem. Okay.
As you please. Chairperson, may I deal with a set of housekeeping matters? In regard to the exhibit relating to the evidence that's going to be led, they all start with SS. We have taken the liberty of dividing the exhibits into a number of categories, and if I could just go through that with you, Mr. Chairperson. The first category is SS1, and this deals with legislation that some of the witnesses intend referring to.
Hang on one second, Mr. Soni. Why do we have this here? Why is this here? Yes.
The most important piece of legislation for this session, Mr. Chairman, is the legal succession to the South African Transport Services Act, which is the first document in SS1. The second document in SS1 is the charter of the PRASA board, and the third set of documents are the relevant provisions of the PFMA to which some of the witnesses refer. We thought we would just collate them so that you would have them ready when witnesses refer to them.
I see the lever arch file marked on the spine, exhibit SS1, that's legislation, exhibit SS2, that's judgments, exhibit SS3, pleadings. Is that the file you're talking about?
That is the file, yes.
Yes, okay.
So the SS1 effectively contains 3 sets of documents, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes.
And then, Mr. Chairperson, and I will explain the need for this, there are a number of judgments that take on an added significance for this session of our sittings. And we have taken the liberty of including 4 of those judgments because reference will be made to them during the course of the testimony, especially of the third witness who's going to be before you. The judgments are, Mr. Chairperson, the judgment of the Gauteng Local Division in the matter of PRASA versus Reform.
1 second, Mr. Soni. I picked up yesterday that it seems that with regard to some of the liver arch files, there seemed to be no index to the contents of the liver arch file. And I'm trying to look at the one I have now, just to check whether it has an index and whether the index is one that I can follow. I see that there is an index, but it doesn't tell me what pages I get the legislation bundle and the judgments and pleadings and blah, blah, blah. But I see that later on, 2 pages later, there is what is referred to Index Exhibit SS1, and it says Annexure PM1 from the affidavit of PS Molefe,
Yes.
page 1 to 40, and then number 2, then Act number 38 of 2008, pages 41 to 45. Now, I think it doesn't look like there is an index for the entire file, or does it exist somewhere? It's just that it's not here. It's much better if I can look at an index at the beginning,
yes,
and it tells me where to find what document. Then I can go straight there,
yes,
rather than looking at small indexes for small components of the file.
Yes.
But if you have got small indices for various components of the file, it should be easy to produce an overall index, because it's a question of just putting that together.
Consolidating all the indices, yes.
Yes, but that's much better than if you refer me to anything, or if I want to look at any document, I go to the controlling index and it tells me where exactly to find the relevant
Chairman, would you
document.
give us an opportunity to attend to that in the next break or 2?
Yes, yeah. If that can be dealt with in the course of the morning,
yes,
it should be available in due course. Okay, all right. At least for the files that we need today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you can continue.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, the judgments and the relevance of the judgments will come out.
Oh, I'm sorry, you know what? Oh, well, you might have to. I see the next exhibit index, SS2, that it starts from page 1 as well. So it might not be as easy as we thought it would be, because it looks like for each item, the index starts from 1 again, but it shouldn't take long.
It should.
Yeah. Okay.
And, Mr. Chairperson, I should also say that when you look at the index to SS2, you will see a reference to PM 5, 6, 9, and 15. What we decided is to remove them from Mr. Molefe's affidavit and put them in a general bundle so that all the witnesses could refer to the same bundle, and there is no need then to have Mr. Molefe's affidavit present all the time. I will, Mr. Chairperson, perhaps I should take this opportunity to say the importance of especially the first two judgments is that scathing remarks are made about the procurement processes at PRASA and the fact that...
I'm sorry, Mr. Soni, I think you had begun to tell us what the evidence starting today into next week will cover when I intervened. I think initially, and think after that, you continued on the basis that maybe you had said what you wanted to say, but I missed it because something else was in my mind. You might wish to just capture again what the evidence will cover during this period, starting today up to, is it Thursday next week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, the evidence relating to the capture of PRASA or state capture at PRASA, however one wants to describe the situation that exists there, will be led in two stages. What that evidence will show, in essence, Mr. Chairman, is the following. First, two individuals were the principal beneficiaries through entities in which they had an interest of lucrative contracts that PRASA concluded with different contractors. One of those persons who benefited, Mr. Chairman, is directly or indirectly from these contracts is Mr. Chokalingam, popularly known as Roy Moodley. Between July 2000, and I'm just sketching all the evidence that will be laid, Mr. Chairman. Between July 2007 and June 2009, an entity directly linked to Mr. Moodley, Royal Security Propriety Limited, paid some 64,000 Rand a month to Mr. Jacob Zuma until just about the time Mr. Zuma became president of the country in May 2009. The total amount that was paid by Royal Security to Mr. Zuma in monthly installments is more than 1.5 million Rand. The exact amount being 1,560,486,32 cents. Then from 2010, Royal Security began receiving contracts from PRASA and has so far been paid more than 471 million Rand by PRASA. Now, the importance of stressing 2010, Mr. Chairman, is related to the previous point I made, and that is that...
just 1 second. There seems to be some interference with the door behind me. Somebody will need to attend to that and make sure there's no interference. Yes.
The point I was making, Mr. Chairman, is you have the payments starting in 2007, ending in 2009. 2010, the Royal Security starts receiving contracts, and up to now, 471 million Rand has been paid to Royal Security. Then, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moodley and Mr. Zuma reportedly have been to a number of social functions together. This has been in the media throughout. It appears on TV at the Durban July, where Mr. Moodley appears to have hosted Mr. Zuma. And there are anecdotal incidents to report. One of them where Mr. Zuma allegedly won 15,000 Rand at a Durban July, where he was hosted by Mr. Moodley. Then, Mr. Chairman, perhaps the one that is of significance for the Commission is an entity called Siangena Technologies Proprietary Limited, which has received payments from PRASA exceeding 4 billion rand, Mr. Chairman, reportedly paid more than 500 million rand to entities in which Mr. Moodley has an interest.
Is that now separate from the 400 and something million rand that Mr. Moodley's entities obtained by way of tenders from PRASA?
And the 471, Mr. Chairperson, is purely Royal Security. This is the company which paid. And so this is to a separate company. We just, companies, one of them being Haleway Trading.
Yes.
But those details will be in the next session where we'll present it all in tabular form.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Lucky Montana, of whom you will hear quite a bit, Mr. Chairman, was PRASA's CEO at all relevant times, relevant to the conclusion of and implementation of the contracts. And I stress that, Mr. Chairperson, because the evidence will show it was not only the conclusion, but thereafter the indulgences granted, extensions granted in respect of those contracts. And he played a central role in the award of that contract to Siangena. The validity of the contracts that I've been referring to, Mr. Chairman, in regard to Siangena, has been challenged in the courts. Not, I must stress, not the Royal Security contract, but the Siangena contract, and there is a contract that was entered into by Prodigy with PRASA, and in respect of Mr. Moodley's role in regard to that contract, our first two witnesses will testify how he tried to force PRASA or employees of PRASA to agree to pay the amount owing to Prodigy, and made certain remarks about the power he held. But that will be the evidence that the witnesses will give. Then the other individual, Mr. Chairman, who has benefited directly or indirectly from PRASA contracts is Mr. Mackenzie Mabunda, a person who worked with Mr. Montana when he was previously at the Department of Public Enterprises. Mr. Mabunda's CIA or S entities have been paid more than 1 billion rand by PRASA for purportedly for providing certain consultancy services. He also, this is Mr. Mabunda, Mr. Chairperson, received an amount of more than 80 million rand in respect of a locomotive contract that PRASA concluded with a third party. And apparently the payment was, and we're going to get the evidence from the master, was for facilitating that contract. So that, Mr. Chairman, is in substance what the nature of the evidence we lead to show that PRASA was in fact captured, and who the capturers were, and who the enforcers of the contract of the capture were. Now, at the time, the contracts from which Mr. Moodley and Mr. Mabunda benefited were awarded, whilst Mr. Montana was the CEO, another important figure in this mix is Mr. Sifiso Buthelezi, who was the chair of the board. And the importance of that position, Mr. Chairman, will come in when Mr. Molefe gives his evidence. He is the chairperson of PRASA's board between August 2014 to July 2017. And that is an important part of how, while he will describe, Mr. Chairperson, what he found in regard to these matters, and what he did and was prevented from doing. And then, Mr. Chairperson, in July 2017, in regard to the 3.5 billion rand contract that I've referred to as the locomotive contract, Justice Francis in the Gauteng local division set aside that contract on the basis that it was tainted by corruption and fronting. And in a scathing judgment, which we will be referring to, he made some very adverse comments about Mr. Montana and a person called Mr. Daniel Mtunkulu, whom you will hear about as well. That decision was taken on appeal to the SCA. Justice Lewis, in the judgment of the SCA, was equally scathing about the role of Mr. Montana and Mr. Mtunkulu, how especially Mr. Mtunkulu engineered the processes, despite the fact that he had no engineering qualifications, and that becomes important, Mr. Chairman, how he engineered the processes to ensure that there was only one outcome in regard to that tender. The Siangena contracts, Mr. Chairperson, as I've said, are valued at about 4 billion rand. They are also the subject of a review before the counting.
So there is Siaya and Siangena,
yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Siaya is Mr. Mabunda.
Yes.
Siangena linked to Mr. Mudli.
Yeah, okay.
And then the Swifambo is a third party, but Mr. Mabunda is a beneficiary of that. And we needn't deal too much with that, except what the courts have said about how PRASA manipulated processes in regard to that contract. And when one reads the review papers in the Siangena matter, Mr. Chairperson, one sees a similar pattern. But we will come to those details. And with regard to the CIA matters, Mr. Chairman, and they take on a slightly different significance. They are the subject, notwithstanding that about 1 billion rand has been paid, they are the subject of arbitration proceedings, and those the amounts claimed are in the region of about just a little more than 60 million rand. And you will see how a former chairperson of PRASA's board attempted to secure payment for CIA, and then the courts had to intervene in that process. So that, Mr. Chairperson, is the evidence that will be led, which, based on documents in our possession, in effect can't be disputed. Now, at the outset, Mr. Chairman, I pointed out that we will be leading evidence in 2 stages. In the stage with which we are busy now for the next 8 days, the evidence that we will be leading, it will be the following. The evidence will focus on the interactions between key individuals at PRASA, in particular the role of Mr. Montana in facilitating PRASA's capture, especially by Mr. Mudli and Mr. Mabunda, and by certain other persons who used entities to gain lucrative contracts. And, Mr. Chairman, just so that it is not said that, well, how do you blame Mr. Montana? He was just CEO. The evidence will show his hand in each of these. Some of it is in handwriting. In fact, the first witness will show in respect of the Prodigy contract, Mr. Montana's clear hand in the matter. And that evidence will be led, that is the evidence that will be led over the next 8 days. May I now, Mr. Chairman, just so that you have an idea of what you can expect over the next 8 days, just summarize very briefly the witnesses and what the evidence is. Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, I'm not required to identify the witnesses at this stage, but if you want me to, I will.
Well, you can, it depends. You know if there are certain issues of safety and security that make it not appropriate to mention their names until they arrive here. So you would know best.
Yes, there are no safety issues, Mr. Chairman, so I will name them.
Okay.
The first witness is going to be Mr. Tiro Holele, and the next witness is Mr. Jacob Rakgoathe. The thrust of their evidence deals with a meeting they had with Mr. Mudley in about February 2017, where Mr. Mudley wanted payment to be made for an entity in which he had an interest. And in respect of that, he said to the two employees, I don't know why you are defending this matter, but I want to say to you that I am one of the 15 top decision makers in this country. Those were his words. And there are going to be major changes coming, and you better be on the right side of the changes. Now, fortunately, Mr. Chairperson, nothing came off that. I'm going to say fortunately from PRASA's point of view. The money was not paid, but that evidence is relevant for a number of issues. And the first one is, Mr. Molefe will testify, he'll be the third witness, that when he became the chairperson of the board in July 2014, he heard of Mr. Mudley and saw Mr. Mudley there, and he says, when you walked around, people would say, that's the owner of PRASA, pointing to Mr. Mudley. And he would be in and out of the offices of different managers walking around with them. In fact, Mr. Molefe keeps saying this on every occasion when I've consulted with him. You would think he was one of the top managers at PRASA. So I'm just trying to show the influence that Mr. Mudley had. So that's the purpose of leading these two witnesses on that very narrow point. The next witness, and perhaps the principal witness in regard to state capture, is Mr. Molefe. And Mr. Molefe's role, Mr. Chairman, when one looks at it objectively, is quite important because it comes in after...
I think your voice is going down.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
It comes in after this period when Mr. Montana and Mr. Sifiso Buthelezi were in effect in control of PRASA, and especially in the procurement processes. And he will deal with that and the concerns he had and what he did to reverse some of the decisions that were taken. But what his role is that from 2014 to 2017, he and his board tried to steer the PRASA ship in a different direction. More importantly, Mr. Chairman, he tells you how, or he will tell you how, state capture at PRASA, and we don't need to go in general, appeared to operate. He will tell you how Mr. Moodley, on several occasions, tried to capture him, as he puts it. He will also tell you that he then had a fallout with Mr. Montana because Mr. Montana would not rectify the manner in which he operated and which the courts were later critical of, and the public protector, as Mr. Molefe will say. Now, when one goes past that, the next thing happens. Mr. Montana hands in his resignation. Against this backdrop that I've described, the board accepts the resignation, and then President Zuma calls a meeting between the then minister, Mr. Pio Peters, Mr. Molefe, Mr. Montana, and the minister in the presidency, at which he seeks to get Mr. Molefe to persuade his board to reinstate Mr. Montana. Mr. Molefe will say he was surprised that the head of state would want to interfere in this. But when he looks at it as a whole, he understands what the big picture was.
This is a situation where that attempt was made in regard to Mr. Montana, who had resigned. He had not been dismissed.
No.
He had resigned,
Yes.
and the board had accepted his resignation.
That is so. So you're quite right, and it is important to emphasize that. It isn't as if the board was taking drastic action. This was a mutual separation.
Well, you probably are not being accurate when you say it was a mutual separation. As I understand it, if it was a resignation,
yes,
Mr. Montana made the decision unilaterally
yes.
that he was leaving PRASA.
No, sure. Yes.
The board just accepted his decision. It's unlike a situation where there is a problem and the parties reach an agreement that let's part ways. He made his own decision to leave PRASA, and the board accepted that.
Absolutely, Mr. Jefferson, and that distinction too is important. Mr. Molefe will also say, Mr. Chairman, that one of the things that concerned him, and he will reflect on it when he's giving evidence, and I'm sure there would be exchanges between you and Mr. Molefe. Hopefully, I will try and resolve most of them first. That given the bad publicity surrounding PRASA for a number of years, even before the time Mr. Montana decided to resign. And I say that, Mr. Jefferson, because the public protector too has investigated PRASA from a set of complaints starting in 2000, which she received in 2012, and she finalized the report in 2015, and it is scathing, and we will reflect on that report. But what Mr. Molefe will say is this: given the fact that our constitution demands accountability from everybody, he is surprised that Mr. Montana was allowed to remain at the helm of PRASA over such a prolonged period. And at the end of the day, one needs to look for a better reason than his just being tolerated. You will also say, Mr. Jefferson, that when he and his board started putting things right, for example, in regard to the Swifambo contract, which Mr. Molefe took to court and had reviewed and set aside, And he also took the Siangena matter to court, but it eventually had to come back to court because of certain matters which needn't detain us now. But when they did investigations as prescribed by the public protector, and, for example, laid charges, the Hawks did nothing about it. He had to take the Hawks to court. And that matter that's 2017, it hasn't been resolved to now. He appealed to Parliament. Parliament, too, did nothing. In fact, they were hostile to Mr. Molefe and his board whenever they appeared there. Of course, I need to add this just to give some balance. They stuck on one fact, that the forensic investigations that Mr. Molefe's board had, the forensic investigators that Mr. Molefe's board had engaged, having been told to do so by the public protector, that had turned out to be costly. And I'll put the figure on the table. The figure that is available at the moment is about 300 million rand. And that's been in the public space as well. But we will deal with the separation of the relevant issues as to whether it was necessary to investigate. And if so, then put a limit on the amount of investigations, but not to stop the investigations. And he is of the view that there was not a bona fide reason to act towards his board in the way it was done. And finally conclude, Mr. Chairperson, Mr. Molefe, that since Mr. Montana left as the CEO, that's in July 2015, we are now in March 2020, nearly 5 years later. PRASA has not yet had a fully appointed CEO. It's only had acting CEOs. And that too, another witness will tell you, Mr. Chairperson, has been eliminated and replaced by an administrator. Secondly, Mr. Molefe will also say that from the time his board was effectively dissolved because their term was not extended, PRASA has not had a permanent board. It's only had interim boards. Again, until December, and that board was in fact formally dissolved by the present minister. And he finds this disturbing in view of a number of matters, including a matter that came up a few weeks ago, where the Siangena matter was before the High Court, and PRASA was not represented until the very last minute and would have incurred expenses of about 6 billion rand had the matter gone undefended, as it were. And it was only at the last minute that the matter was, in fact, postponed. But, of course, PRASA had to pay the costs. Effectively, Chairperson, that means you, I, and everybody here have to share that cost. Then, Mr. Chairperson, we have two important witnesses, but their evidence is going to be condensed quite considerably.
1 second, Mr. Sonny. Can I just check that everybody is able to hear me and to hear Mr. Sonny well? I see some of the people shake their heads, others agree. I think those who are far can't hear. Does that include me or only Mr. Sonny? Can even me? You can hear me? Okay, but you can't hear Mr. Sonny?
I'll speak a little louder.
Yeah, try and speak loud so that they can,
Yes.
everybody can hear. Okay, thank you.
We have, Mr. Chairperson, the head of PRASA's legal section and the general manager in that section who will complain that when they try to intervene in contracts in which Mr. Montana appeared to have an interest, for example, in the Prodigy contract, steps were taken against them. In fact, both of them were dismissed. They will give details of that. We don't need extensive details. But it goes on to show, Mr. Chairperson, that that is the manner in which Mr. Montana ran PRASA. They came back only through the intervention of Mr. Molefe. They came back. But the culture that Mr. Montana started at PRASA has now returned after the short intermission, as it were, during which Mr. Molefe and his board tried to put PRASA on a better wicket. They will also say, Mr. Chairperson, that when decisions are taken about legal matters, they are excluded. They believe deliberately so that no dissenting voice can be heard about those decisions. Now, there is one aspect of the evidence which is quite disturbing, Mr. Chairperson, and it is this, that I've told you that the Swifambo contract has been set aside. The Siaya matters and the Siangena matters are the subject of litigation, whether review proceedings or arbitration proceedings. But very recently, the Department of Transport had a meeting with representatives of Siaya and Siangena, where they were saying, but why are we defending these matters? We must save legal costs. But they will give that evidence. And the disturbing thing, Mr. Chairperson, is, and I say this because it is at the heart of state capture, we know that the rule of law and the principle of legality are central values in our Constitution. When there is a legal dispute in terms of Section 34 of the Constitution, anybody who has an interest in the matter must take it or ought to take it to court. And that's what PRASA has done in these matters. What they are trying to do is bypass all those constitutional mechanisms and says, well, we can settle these matters. Instead of, and these, as I say, Mr. Chairman, are not small sums of money. The arbitrations are 60 million, and the Siangena matters. Totally, if the same remedy is issued as was issued in the Swifambo matter, then the 4 billion rand that has been paid might well have to be returned, or parts of it. But one doesn't know what the purpose is of these mechanisms to bypass the legal process. And, Mr. Chairperson, we submit that their evidence is quite crucial for that. They also say, Mr. Chairperson, in another disturbing matter, and Ms. Ngoyi, who is the head, she filed 2 affidavits. In an earlier affidavit she filed, she says that a move has been made by people outside the department, outside legal at PRASA, to enter into a contract between PRASA and the DBSA for 1 billion rand, and DBSA's role effectively will be to run PRASA's infrastructure program. So effectively, it will then distribute these lucrative contracts. And the question really that we would need to tease out is it a mechanism to ensure that those in PRASA who scrutinize these matters are kept out of that space, that crucial space which protects the public interest? Then, Mr. Chairperson, we have the evidence of Ms. Kwayama, who is the last chairperson of a board at PRASA. That board was dissolved in December 2019. And what she will say is that the reason her board was dissolved is that the minister wanted a particular individual, namely Mr. Mpondo, to be appointed the CEO, and the board wanted a proper process before a decision was taken. And what effectively happened is the minister became impatient.
Is that the Minister of Transport?
The Minister of
at the
Transport,
moment? Mr. Mbalula, okay.
And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes, well, you were talking about the dismissal or disbandment or dissolution of the board that was chaired by Ms. Kwayama, and you were saying that she's going to give evidence to the effect that the reason why her board was dissolved, and you were going to proceed from there.
That he became impatient, and as is the want of people who exercise public power especially, his attitude was, why should I wait for you? I'm just dissolving the board. But the dilemma he then faced, Mr. Chairperson, is he doesn't have a CEO because the board wouldn't participate. And I just need to say, I will refer you to the relevant provision of the board charter, which says that the minister appoints the CEO on the recommendation of the board. So if there's no recommendation, no appointment can be made. So what the minister does, what Mr. Mbalula does, is the following. He dissolves the board. He doesn't appoint Mr. Mpondo as the CEO. Rather, he appoints him as the administrator. Now, Mr. Chairperson, we've included the relevant statutory provisions relating to PRASA, and no provision is made for an administrator. But I just put one difficult. Sorry.
Yeah. So Ms. Kwayama will say the minister wanted the board to appoint Mr. Mpondo as CEO, and the board didn't seem to be keen, to say the least.
Yes.
And the minister was the right person to appoint the CEO, but in terms of the relevant statute, he could only appoint the CEO if there was a recommendation from the board. And according to Ms. Kwayama, when the minister realized that the board didn't seem to be keen on appointing Mr. Mpondo, he dissolved the board and then appointed Mr. Mpondo as administrator of PRASA. But you say that in law, there is no provision for the appointment of an administrator in regard to PRASA, and you're saying that the function of an administrator would include the functions of a CEO, maybe go much beyond that, I don't know, but it would include the functions of a CEO. Is that what you're saying?
And if I could add the following, Mr. Chairperson, in terms of the PFMA, every public entity, if it has a board, that is the accounting authority. Now, the statutory provision provides for the minister to appoint a board. If there is no board, there is no accounting authority. So, effectively, Mr. Mpondo wears two hats. He's the CEO on the one hand, because he's in charge of the day-to-day operations. But because there is no board, he is effectively the accounting authority.
Well, but if you are correct that as a matter of law, there is no power given to the minister to appoint an administrator at PRASA, then the administrator has no power to do anything and has no power to make any decisions at PRASA, and all the decisions that he purports to make are not lawful.
Yes, indeed.
That is, if your submission that there is no law giving the minister such power, that would be the effect of that. And there is somebody who purports to exercise power that doesn't exist in law. Yes.
Now, if I could go back to the two legal advisors, they gave such an opinion to the administrator, and in retaliation, he suspended one of them.
So that would be is that Mr. Mbo?
He suspended Mr. Dingiswayo.
Mr. Dingiswayo.
Who is on suspension at the moment.
Yes, for following upon that advice that he gave.
He doesn't say that
it's following
because of this, but what he says is, you are undermining my position.
By raising that point.
That's right.
That he doesn't have any legal power to exercise. There's no legal authority to exercise any power as an administrator. Okay.
So if this had happened prior to the promulgation of this commission, Mr. Chairperson, one could understand. But when it happens while this commission is sitting, it is a very worrying commentary on the respect that our authorities have for the rule of law and for constitutional principles. Mr. Chairperson, finally, yes. Our final witness is going to be Mr. Zakir Ahmed. Now, he is a voice from civil society. He comments quite extensively in his affidavit. But the importance of his evidence, Mr. Chairperson, is this. He is one of the leaders of an NGO called #UniteBehind. They have been involved both with and against PRASA in the courts. For example, in the Siangena matter, they are with PRASA against Siangena. But in other matters, for example, against the Hawks and so on, they are with PRASA against the Hawks for not doing their job. Now, he has researched this, and he makes 2 points, Mr. Chairman, which I submit are very vital. That as a public body, they were entitled to look at our public representatives to fix up matters. So in February 2018, UniteBehind sent a submission to Parliament on state capture at PRASA. Parliament undertook to conduct that inquiry. It has reneged on that, and it has not happened to this day, 2 years later. And again, his point is, if you had done what you are paid to do as parliamentarians, maybe PRASA would not be in this sorry state, and we would not be saying things about PRASA today. But finally, I need to make this point about Mr. Ahmed's evidence. Chairperson, at some level, those of us who are involved in investigations into state capture or in discussions on state capture and so on, we deal with this on the basis, but the state capture is there. What Mr. Ahmed does is, he tells you the direct effect this has on men, women, and children.
I wanted to say I forgot to switch off my cell phone, so may I remind everybody to do so. So it just rang at the wrong time.
I'm sorry.
So, yes, please proceed.
But the value of his evidence is, he's not talking as from a far field. He is saying, I take the train, I look at what happens. We've been fighting this for the last 6 years or so. Nothing has happened. Nothing good has happened. In fact, if anything, the situation has deteriorated. And in that sense, everybody has failed the most vulnerable members of our society. That our democracy, with respect, Mr. Chairman, cannot continue to allow.
Going back to the issue of the administrator, the appointment of the administrator for PRASA, do you know how far the litigation is that one has heard about?
Yes. It is before the courts, brought by Unite Behind, who challenge the minister's power to make that appointment. That, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, is a matter in the Western Cape High Court. I have not inquired, but I know it is still being
exchange of affidavits.
Yes.
Okay. It would be interesting to know how far it is to getting a date, if possible, whether it's a situation where all affidavits are in and the date might be allocated at any time.
Yes.
It just might be important to know.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairperson, then that is going to be the totality of the evidence and a summary of the evidence that's going to be led during this session, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay, no, thank you.
May I then just again allow you to navigate through the rather bulky bundles that have been presented to you, and if I could just orientate you towards those, Mr. Chairperson. SS1 is the legislation, and of course there are two very important provisions there. That's the Legal Succession Act, because that will determine the powers of the minister in regard to the appointment of an administrator and not having a board. And secondly, the board charter, which, as I say, has a specific provision, which I will refer you to at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, that says that the minister appoints the CEO on the recommendation of the board. And then, of course, the relevant provisions of the PFMA, and the one that is important is 49 and 50, that the board is the accounting authority of PRASA. And then, of course, I've dealt with the two judgments regarding Swifambo. I then need to take you to the third judgment, Mr. Chairperson. It is a judgment that Mr. Molefe is well qualified to deal with, because it is his taking the minister to court, the minister at that time, Minister Dipuo Peters, because she dissolved the board without good reason, and the High Court set aside that decision and the comments it made about the importance of the board. And then the fourth decision there is PRASA bringing, Mr. Molefe effectively bringing an application against the Hawks to investigate the Swifambo and the Siangena matters. And as I say, nothing has been done. Significance of that, though, Mr. Chairperson, is the Hawks, in their first response to this very serious charge that you are not doing your job, they challenged Mr. Molefe's locus standi to bring the application. And Judge Davis, in a rather scathing judgment, says it is a pity that organs of state would waste state money to deal with peripheral matters rather than getting to the substance of the matter. It is clearly a scathing indictment of the way the Hawks purport to exercise their powers. Then, Mr. Chairperson, as far as the pleadings go, there are two matters that we will refer to at different parts. I'm not going to take you through everything, but I merely make this point, Mr. Chairperson. One of the things we want to say is, yes, we know what the Swifambo court said about irregularities, corruption, and fronting, and so on. But what we want to show with these others, and they include their criticism of Mr. Montana, with these is the role that Mr. Montana played in it. And then SS4, Mr. Chairperson, is a general reference bundle because for example, Mr. Ahmed had mentioned certain documents which some of the implicated parties had said they want copies of, and we've included one of those in this reference bundle. And then PRASA's policies and procedures, just in case you want to look at them, Mr. Chairperson. Then, in the affidavit of Mr. Ahmed, he refers to the role of Mr. Arthur Fraser, whom we all know from the SSA, and he says that Mr. Fraser worked through resurgent risk. Well, resurgent risk was his company through which he offered security services to PRASA, notwithstanding that being in the security services of the state, it was his duty to provide that in his capacity, in the capacity he occupied at that time. So that's the resurgent risk report. And then there are disciplinary proceedings against Mr. Zide. The relevance of that will come at a later stage, Mr. Chairman. Then we have a liquidators report, but we are not going to present it to you, Mr. Chairperson. And I should explain, we had intended it to show the benefits that Mr. Mabunda received. But the liquidators report refers to a number of other people, and on further consideration, we thought we should present that as at the time we present the money flow matters relating to PRASA, so that we could just articulate and isolate those persons. But if other persons are mentioned, they would be given an opportunity, and we would tell them why we are presenting the report. So those are the documents that are before you, Mr. Chairman, and that's the summary of the evidence that will be led.
I take it that all implicated persons have been served with Rule 33 notices, and the period of 14 days has lapsed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mr. Chairperson, I have a document here. I just want to make 2 points. There is one person who was not served and a company he is associated with, but that's because he is from Zimbabwe and has moved back to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So, but everybody else who is implicated has been served.
So you have not been able to find any way of communicating, giving notice to the particular person and his company?
No.
Yes.
And
Okay.
he's not at the center of things. Mr.
Yes,
Chairperson.
okay.
The effort that was put in was on the basis that how relevant
Okay.
is that evidence.
Okay. So you're ready to start?
We are
with your
ready
first
to read our
witness?
first witness.
We are at 8 minutes past 11, and we're due to have the tea break at 15:15. Maybe we should start so that the oath is administered and maybe some preliminary issue.
Holele.
Yes, okay. Please administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Tiro Holele.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Maybe we should take the tea adjournment, or do you think maybe we could use this 5 minutes left
Yes.
for preliminary issues?
There is one issue, Mr. Chairperson.
Yes.
Currently, the witness deals with a meeting relating to Prodigy, and Prodigy's legal representative is here. Mr. Chairperson, I know you asked much earlier if there were representatives. At that time, nobody was here, but he would like to place himself
Yes,
on record.
let him place himself on record. He'll come to that to the podium there.
Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. Good morning. You are not new in this commission.
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, Judge. It's Maniklau for the record. Initial
Yes.
is R.
Yes.
Judge, I represent actually two parties in this proceedings.
Yes.
The first party, my learned friend correctly pointed out, is a service provider by the name of Prodigy, commonly referred to Prodigy during the proceedings. And Judge, this party is involved in litigation with PRASA. That's currently before the courts. Judge, so I won't take it any further than that, but they
Yes.
do reserve the rights to apply for leave to cross-examine, subject to judge
Yes.
discretion in the matter.
Okay. No,
Yes,
that's fine.
that's the first party.
Yes.
Judge, the second party that I represent is the one my learned friend did spend some time on, and that is Mr. Moodley.
Yes.
And Judge, without taking too much of your time, essentially Mr. Moodley denies the allegations that have been made. He said he will make the necessary application in due course for leave to cross-examine these witnesses that makes the allegations, and he will easily dispel the notion that my learned friend set forth in the address, which is obviously arriving from what the witnesses say in their affidavits. But Judge,
Yes.
it would be premature for me to address you on that till we listen to
Yes.
the witnesses' evidence.
Yeah. No, that's true.
That's for the record, Judge.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Soni, I think we may just take the tea adjournment and then
As you
we'll
please.
start when we come back. We are going to take the tea adjournment and we are going to resume at 11:30. We adjourn.
media box. The judge is ready to come in. Can we finish? Are you happy? Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, Mr. Soni.
As you please, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Holele,
Hang on, you need me to...
oh, I beg your pardon. Mr. Chairperson, it's SS10. Exhibit SS10, it starts at 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and
I think
11.
maybe we must admit this first, so that... So that we don't forget. You know, I see that this file has got SS5, SS8, SS9, or there is no 6 and 7. There's somewhere else.
Yes, and that's because we're unlikely to refer to those today.
I think it might be better if they were under one exhibit, and then you have A, B, C, D, E, because it helps when we admit it. It helps if what I say is what one will see.
Yes.
And on the spine of the file. So I think when my mic is on, yours should be off. I think that's because otherwise there's echo. And when yours is on, mine will be off, and we'll do it like that throughout. I don't know whether that will be the same with the witness, but you will need yours to be on when you are asking the witness, and his will need to be on because he will be answering. In the other venue, 2 could be on without any problem. I'm hoping that somebody is going to whisper to you just now exactly what the position is, and you will let me know in due course. So with regard to this liver arch file, it's got these exhibits, these statements, but they are marked under different exhibits. and the file is not a controlling file. Would it be easy to make this as exhibit, or it can't be exhibit S5 and then A, B, C, D, because you already have this? Okay, maybe for other, okay, switch yours off.
Sorry.
Maybe what, for the other liver arch files, somebody needs to attend to that. It's the way we have been doing them all the time. What's written on the spine of the liver arch file should be indicating the controlling exhibits. And then if necessary, you can have A, B, C, which are inside the liver arch file. That makes it easier. Your junior counselor should be able to attend to that in regard to the others. I guess we just have to use this as is because we don't have time to change, but all the others, attempts should be made to try and align them with how we have been dealing with others. Yeah. The liver arch file, I think yeah, it's complicated. It's a question of identification. When I ask somebody to go and look for it, I must be able to say it's a liver arch file marked exhibit so and so. But here it says exhibit SS5, exhibit SS8, and so on, which are exhibits inside. That's fine. But so if I say exhibit SS5, it's not the file, it's an exhibit inside. But of course, the important thing is not the file for admission, is the contents. But for identification, it helps if one says on the spine, this is the file. I think we'll just deal with each exhibit as it comes. Maybe we'll find a way of sorting it out later. Let's deal with them as they come. So we'll admit each exhibit as need arises and not everything at the beginning.
As you please. Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I came into a process which I told operates in this way.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Obviously, it's not.
It's not a train smash.
Mr. Chairperson, I've also been told that the same facility that existed at the previous venue exists here. In other words, all our mics can be on at the same time. That's what I've been told.
Well, the way my voice is when yours is on doesn't appear to be what one expects. But let's continue. I'm sure they will be doing what they may need to do. But I'll put mine off while you are talking and while the witness is talking. And when I put it on, I don't know whether it is the same. What's your feeling when I speak with your mic on and mine being on, and when yours is off? Is it like the same? Yeah, I think I see somebody else behind you who corroborates you. So maybe the problem is just me. Switch it on.
About to give today.
Yes.
Do you have the statement in front of you?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Now that statement is marked SS10. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit SS10.
Yes, sir.
Now, You've read the statement.
Yes, sir.
Do you?
Hang on. I must just get to it. Yes. Yes, continue.
As you please, Mr. Chairman. You confirm the correctness of what's contained in your statement.
Yes, I do, Chairperson.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, where do you work at the moment?
I am the acting CEO of Autopax, a wholly owned bus subsidiary of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa.
And in your previous positions in PRASA or any of its subsidiaries, what positions did you hold?
I've had various roles, Chairperson. I've been a general manager in the office of the Group CEO of PRASA.
Just at that point, when you say the group CEO, whom are you talking about, the identity of the person?
Mr. Lucky Montana. I have been...
Mr.?
Lucky Montana. Mr. Lucky Montana.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think your voice is falling, and I think, like the chairperson, I was having difficulty. So if you could move closer to the mic for one.
Just try the best you can.
Yes. General manager in the office of the group CEO, Mr. Lucky Montana. Yes. I have been...
And face this side as you... He's asking questions, you're answering his questions, but you face me. I think that's going to help me to hear what you are saying.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I have been general manager for corporate affairs in PRASA at some point. I have been a group chief strategy officer, and I have also been a manager, an executive manager at Intersight Asset Investments, which is another subsidiary of PRASA, looking at property and other related assets. And I have been then back again to corporate office as group executive in the office of the group CEO maybe 2 years ago until recently. And now I'm acting CEO at the bus subsidiary Autopax.
I wonder whether you need to lower the mic.
Affidavit made by Ms. Ngoi and an affidavit made by Mr. Dingazwayo.
Yes, I do, Chairperson.
I want to return to those matters in a little while. I want to start off, though, your evidence with what you say in regard to the meeting that you, Mr. Rakgoathe, and Mr. Mudley had. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
So let's just start off. When was that meeting held?
The meeting was held, Chairperson, in 2017, at the beginning of the year. I think it would have been around February, March.
How did that meeting come about?
I was called by, I think, the MD, the Managing Director of Prodigy.
Who was that?
Ms. Nerishni Shunmugan. And she asked for a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it would be good if we can give spellings for names that
Yes.
might not be familiar in terms of spelling for the transcribers. Yes. Yes, you can give it if you are able to.
Nerishni, I think, is N-E. I'm going to battle.
Can I help?
Yes.
Nerishne and Shanmugam is Shunmugam.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd been called by Ms. Shanmugam, and she requested a meeting because at that point now I was group executive in the office of the group CEO. And she requested a meeting to...
Sorry, it is going to be important. At that time, who was the group CEO?
At that time, Mr. Lindikaya Zide, Chairperson, was the acting group CEO of PRASA.
Does that mean that this is long after Mr. Montana left?
Yes, sir. And so Ms. Shanmugam asked for a meeting and to discuss, the issues the issues between PRASA and Prodigy, and I agreed to the meeting.
So just tell us who was Prodigy.
So Prodigy was a service provider providing training to PRASA employees on, I think, customer-related services matters, customer relations.
Just, can I find out whether the transcribers have no problem hearing what the witness is saying? I'm just concerned that we might go on for quite some time only to find out later that they are struggling.
Yes.
They can hear. Okay. All right.
All right, so let's get to the meeting now. You are called by Ms. Shanmugam, and you agree to the meeting.
Yes, I do, Chair.
Did you go alone from PRASA's side?
No, I did not, Chairperson.
Who went with you?
I asked my colleague, Mr. Jacob Rakgoathe, who is in the legal section, to accompany me to the meeting.
Is there any particular reason you asked him to accompany you?
Yes, Chairperson, there is. Because I knew that there was, this dispute between PRASA and Prodigy. I felt it prudent to just get somebody to accompany me to that meeting, and even better to get somebody from the legal section of the business.
Maybe just tell us what the issue was between PRASA and Prodigy.
If I recall, Chair, I think there were really two. The first was just generally dispute regarding the validity of the contract. But for this meeting, it was about payment that Prodigy felt was due to Prodigy, and PRASA was in dispute regarding that payment.
Was the payment, which was the second issue, was the payment in relation to a different contract or in relation to the same contract, the validity of which was being challenged by PRASA?
It was in relation to the same contract.
Okay.
Now, you go to this meeting. Whom did you expect would be representing Prodigy at the meeting?
I expected Ms. Narishni Shanmugam to be representing Prodigy.
And where was the meeting to take place?
In the PRASA building, actually in the small boardroom of the group CEO.
Was there any discussion about what the venue of the meeting should be?
Yes, Ms. Shanmugam wanted the meeting to be outside of the PRASA building.
Did she indicate
Outside PRASA?
Yes, outside of PRASA.
Okay.
Did she indicate why?
She said something to the effect that it was for my own protection.
For your protection?
Yes.
Did you understand?
I'm sorry. There was a minute or two when I could hear you very clearly.
Yes. Okay.
I don't know what had happened, but otherwise there is some difficulty. Just repeat why she wanted the meeting to be outside of PRASA.
She said, for my own protection.
For your own protection?
Yes.
Okay.
What did you understand that to be?
It was bizarre. It was a bizarre statement to me, Chair. And I said, now the meeting will take place in the PRASA building.
And why did you insist on the meeting being held at the PRASA building?
For the reasons that I've spelled out, Chair, that it's a sensitive matter. It's a matter in court. It's a matter in dispute, and it would have been improper for me to have a formal meeting about the business on a matter like this outside of the building.
I wonder whether, see, I can hear you, Mr. Soni, much better, And I'm struggling to hear the witness. I wonder whether if he is sitting elsewhere that would change any, improve anything. Okay, let's see how it goes. And then, if need be, we could have him sit maybe much further.
Yes.
Because I can hear you well. But,
Yes.
okay, let's try again.
I must confess, Mr. Chairperson, I'm also having some difficulty with
Okay.
Mr. Holele,
Maybe
hearing Mr. Holele.
I think
Yes.
it's a turn.
Okay, let's try and see after the intervention and see if there's any improvement.
Right. So quite ironically, she thought that if the meeting is held outside PRASA, you would be protected. But you thought if the meeting is held at PRASA, you would be protected.
Yes, Chairperson.
Did you ask her why she was saying you needed protection for this meeting?
No, I did not, Chair. It was just enough reason for me to insist then
Yes.
that it be in the building.
Yes. Had you had any dealings with her before?
Yes, I had, Chair.
Many dealings?
Not many, no.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just, in the building with the program, so we would have met, just on
Yes.
the program when the program was introduced.
Yes.
Yeah.
And previously she had never talked about you needing any protection.
No, no.
Okay. Looks
Anyway,
like there is some improvement, at least from my side.
it certainly is better from my
Yes.
side. as well.
Okay. Let's see.
Now, you go to this meeting expecting to see Ms. Shanmugam,
Yes, Chairperson.
who appears at the meeting on behalf of Prodigy.
So Mr. Rakgoathe and I walk into the boardroom, and Ms. Shanmugam was not there. The person who was there instead was Mr. Roy Moodley.
Did you know Mr. Roy Mood?
Yes, I did.
How did you come to know him?
I knew him through, him being a service provider at PRASA, and especially through the Prodigy work. He had been, in the business around Prodigy at a graduation function, when there was a graduation. So yeah, I knew him from there.
I'm just going to ask you this. In an affidavit that Mr. Molefe made, he says that people refer to Mr. Moodley as the owner of PRASA. I'd just like you to comment on that.
Yes, I think generally he was known to be a very influential person.
He was known as an influential person.
Yes,
Yes.
just generally amongst senior people especially.
Now, this is at PRASA. We're
Yes,
not
at
talking
PRASA.
about in the
At
public
PRASA. No,
space.
at PRASA, yes.
Is that a view that you shared, that he was influential at PRASA?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Why did you think he was influential at PRASA?
He was just, through various contracts, he would be there, he would be in the building from time to time, and just the manner in which he was around, he was just known to be an influential person.
Yes. Well, I want to get more details about that. Did you, to your knowledge, were there any decisions that were taken at PRASA which he influenced in any way?
I wouldn't have direct knowledge about that, Chair, but I knew that, through this contract, he was involved in it, just in and around the contract. I knew that he had the security company, and just the manner in which he would interact with the business, very forceful.
What was he doing? Was he throwing his weight around? What was he doing that made you think he was influential at PRASA? He was only a service provider, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was an outsider to PRASA.
Yes, he was an outsider to PRASA.
Yes.
The context at the time was such that, yeah, he would be in the building from time to time.
Did he claim to be the owner of PRASA?
No, I
As
never
far as
heard
you
him-
know.
No, I never heard him make such a claim.
Did he claim to be influential within PRASA? Is it because maybe people heard him say he's influential? Is it anything like that that
Not,
helped him?
not directly to me, no, Chair.
Yes,
No, not
yes.
directly to me. But
How often would he be around at PRASA, more or less?
Well, from time to time you'd see him, Chair. From time to time, like I say, I saw him at a very, I think the launch of the program for the training, at the graduation function in Birchwood Hotel. And yeah, so, you'd ask us, he would be in front, he would be at the front area, front tables.
Was he ever, or did he often, was he often at a function or place in PRASA where he was not supposed to be?
Well, remember, it's a public institution, Chair. So it would be difficult to say, it's not supposed to be there.
Yes.
So
Well, it might be a public institution, but I can't just walk in there and sit in the boardroom.
No, not in that regard. But he'll be having meetings, which is normal in that regard as a service provider.
Yes.
So that would be normal. But I'm saying that's how
Yes.
you'd come to know. Oh,
Yes.
you see him at the graduation function. Oh,
Yes.
it's the same place. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just ask for a summation of things, compared to other service providers, was he more prominent at PRASA?
Oh, yes.
Much more prominent.
Yes.
And was there anybody else who was as prominent as he was?
No, I can't recall.
But when you say he was prominent, are you simply talking about his frequent presence at PRASA?
His presence, really.
Yeah.
And not, like I say, presence in the symbolism of power. So, at the graduation, he'd be also there in front. He'd be, so you notice him. It is that kind of symbolism of authority.
I'm trying to understand because you say, as far as you know, he didn't claim to be influential, generally speaking, I guess.
Well, not directly to me.
Not directly to you.
Yes.
But you thought, and other people thought, as I understand, that he was influential, and
Yes,
some
sir.
even thought, in a way, he was the owner of PRASA. I was trying to understand how people came to give him those labels.
Because, like I said, Chair, because of the manner in which he carried himself, and I mean the meeting that we speak about for me really then eventually stood out.
Yeah.
It's a confirmation
Yeah.
of that which I had also come to know.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Soni.
In fact, it is the very first time at this meeting that he formally tells you about the power he holds.
Yes.
Well, let's have that come from you. Tell us about that meeting.
So-
You were expecting somebody else, and then he
Yes.
was there, and what happened?
So I was expecting Ms. Narishni Shunmugan. I attended the meeting with Mr. Jacob Rakgoathe, and we walked into the boardroom, and Ms. Shunmugan was not there, and Mr. Mutli was seated, present in the room.
At that time, did you know Mr. Mutli to be associated in any way with Prodigy?
Yes, I did, Chair.
Did he have a position at Prodigy?
I didn't really know at that time what his position was,
Yes.
but he was associated with Prodigy.
So when you saw him there, did you immediately think he would be the person representing Prodigy by virtue of of the association
Yes,
you
Chair.
thought he had?
She was
What was her position at Prodigy?
I think she was managing director.
Yes. Okay, and as far as Mr. Moodley was concerned, You didn't know whether he had a formal position
No, I
there or
didn't know.
not, but you knew he had an association
Yes.
with Prodigy.
Yes.
Okay, and then the meeting started? Or did you
The
ask
meeting-
about why the MD wasn't there?
Yes, I did actually. I remember I did ask where Narishni is, and she says, "Oh no, she's in another meeting somewhere."
Just repeat that.
He said she's in another meeting somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
So he's representing Project.
Yes. Tell us about the content of the discussion at the meeting.
So we exchanged pleasantries. Chairperson, good morning, sir. You know, how are you? And I think at least I was taken aback, so you know I needed to compose myself a bit. We exchanged pleasantries, and then we said, "Yes, sir, we are here, you know, to hear you." And he said, "Well, guys, you know that PRASA owes us money, and you know I've come to request you to make the payments that are due to Prodigy."
Did he
At
mention
that stage, how much were they claiming was due to them
I
from
think
PRASA?
it was about 24 million or so. 24
Oh,
million
okay.
rand, yes, Chair.
Okay, so he said that.
Did he mention a figure at the meeting?
Yes,
decision makers in the country. How did you react to that?
We react to it.
Let's talk about you, Mr. President.
Look, we just kept quiet. We just listened.
But what was your internal reaction?
Well, it was fear.
Fear.
Yes.
Did you believe him?
Yes.
Did you say you believed him?
And we must be on the right side of those changes.
Oh, okay. And what did you understand that to mean?
Well, I understood it to mean whatever the changes at the top of us, we do not want the top on the wrong side of whoever will come in to be in charge.
Yes.
And in this case, at ministerial level.
At that stage, he was the Minister of Transport.
It was Minister Dipuo Peters.
Yes, yes, thank you.
And this was early March 2000.
Yeah, it was the beginning of
2017. Now,
I'm sorry, 2000 and?
2017.
Yeah, 2017.
Oh, 2017.
Yes.
Can I ask you this? He talked about big changes at government. Did he say anything about any possible changes at PRASA?
Yes, he did.
What did he say about it?
He basically said, and when those changes happen, the young man will come back.
And what did you understand that to mean?
We understood it to mean Mr. Montana would return as Group CEO.
Why did you associate his reference to the young man who will come back to Mr. Montana?
It was just the context, Chair. So basically, and remember, me as an official, when essentially those were threats that were being made, and it means, you know, when he comes back, you had better take this payment. And
Yes.
so, and he expected that the young man will come back.
So did he say when the big changes that we're talking about, the young man would come back?
Yes.
And your understanding was that the changes he was talking about included a change in terms of the Minister of Transport?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I just want to raise with you something. Did you know that it is in the first week of March 2017 that Minister Dipuo Peters dismissed Mr. Molefe's board? Are
Yes.
you aware of it?
Yes, I.
Did this meeting take place before dismissal?
It took place.
Now, when Mr. Moodley said when the changes happen, the young man would come back, which you understood to be a reference to Montana. What was your reaction to that?
Well, to it, Chair, like I said, firstly, just in the conversation, we kept quiet. We didn't say anything. We just listened to it. We just sat there.
What was your understanding as to Mr. Montana's departure from PRASA? Was it your understanding that he had left of his own accord, he had resigned, or was the understanding that he had left against his will or had been dismissed?
Firstly, factually, Chair, my understanding was that he had left of his own accord, he had resigned. Of course, as an executive, knew that there were conflicts at that level of the board and Mr. Montana.
So when Mr. Motley said the young man will come back when those big changes happened, did that surprise you, bearing in mind that your understanding was that he had left of his own accord? Or not really? Or is it something you didn't take a reflection or think about?
It didn't surprise me that he would say something like that.
And why did it not surprise you?
Like I said, because of the posture of influence and power, that he conducted himself with, that we've come to know. So he was basically saying, like he said, he must be on the right side of all of these changes.
Mm.
And yes, so it didn't surprise me.
Yes. Do you know on which side he was going to be when that happened?
Say that again, Chair.
Did you know on which side he was going to be when the changes happened?
Which side, Mr. Moodley?
Mr. Motley, did you know on which side he was going to be, and whether that it was the same side that he wanted you to be, or different sides?
No, it was clear that I needed to be on his side, and Mr. Rakgoathe, we needed, and continuing to refuse to pay Prodigy meant that we're against that side.
Okay.
You didn't agree to pay Prodigy at that meeting, certainly.
No, we didn't.
Were you willing to risk being on the wrong side of the changes that he had foreshadowed in that meeting?
Yes, I was.
And why is that so?
Because it was a simple matter. Legal dispute. The matter is in court. The papers are before court. We certainly would not have had the wherewithal to even effect that payment.
But just dealing with the changes now. Were there any changes that came soon after the meeting?
Yes, Chair.
What was that change?
Well,
I'm sorry, before that, how did your meeting with Mr. Motley end?
It was just a dead end, a stalemate.
It was a stalemate.
Yeah, just a stalemate, because we kept on going back and forth, and we struggled then to find our conclusion to even, okay, it looks like we've exhausted the stalemate.
Yes. Were there any arguments advanced by Mr. Motley to try and persuade you to pay, or was it a situation that he was just demanding that you pay and you were saying, no, we are in court, we won't pay now, and there was no motivation, new arguments that you had not had or anything like that?
No, Chair, there was no new argument.
But there was motivation why it would be for you to pay?
Yes. I mean, it insisted that, the payment must be done. Mm-hmm. It was just this insistence.
Yeah, but what I'm asking was whether in support of that insistence, he told you anything other than what appeared to be a threat?
No.
Yes, okay.
In other words, it was simply a question of, Roy Moodley, say to you, pay, therefore you must pay. Not because the money is due, not because your defense is faulty or what.
Yes, of course it was those kinds of, the key one then, which is why they're arguing that PRASA owes them this amount of money. And these invoices are due and payable. Beyond that, nothing more.
Well, I guess that from his point of view, the money was due to
It was due and payable, yes.
Yeah.
Now, in relation to the changes that Mr. Moodley had forecast at the meeting, did anything happen to indicate that his forecast was correct?
Yes, Chairman, it did happen.
What happened?
Indeed, a shuffling of cabinet happened, and Mr. Dipuo Peters was removed as our Minister of Transport, and Mr. Joe Maswangani was appointed as Minister of Transport.
About how long after the meeting?
Like I say, maybe it was a couple of weeks was the end of March.
And when that happened, did it strike you that here is a person we had already forecast?
Yes, it did. Chair.
You say a couple of weeks. I'm sure that the actual date can be found of the announcement of the change, so that should be looked into. But you are
Yes.
confident it was a few weeks.
Just a couple of weeks, Chair.
Yes.
That's why I'm saying the meeting would have happened between end Feb and March.
Yes.
Around Feb, March.
Yes. Okay, and you think the cabinet reshuffle
Was later in March.
was sometime
In March.
in March?
I think actually it was the end of March or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the witnesses, Mr. Molefe and Mr. Ahmed, will tell us that it happened at the end of March.
It happened in March. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Now, can I just ask you something slightly different and go back to the issues you raised in your affidavit, which I said I was going to return to. Now, in relation to Prodigy, to Mr. Dingazwayo's affidavit, there is attached a document which I'd like you to look at. Mr. Chairman, it is DM3.
TM3.
Sorry, MMD3.
MMD3.
Yes. It's an annexure to Mr. Dingazwayo's affidavit.
Did you say after it's annexed to Mr. Dingusayo's affidavit?
And it appears at the top at page 43, Mr. Chairman.
The advisors marked 1 up to
Yes, so it will
11.
be 3. The one that's marked 3.
And then there is, the one that is marked 3, when I open on it, that's page 55.
Oh, should be 43.
It's Unite Behind.
No. Should be page 43. Sorry, Mr. Chivers, maybe I didn't identify
Is it in the same bundle?
It's SS8.
SS8.
Yes.
And what is the annexure?
Annexure MMD3.
Yes. I've got it.
Have you got that, Mr. Holele?
Yes, Chair.
What is that document?
It's the heading, the subject, Piloting Center of Excellence Model and Leadership Implementation.
And
I think just repeat that. I don't know what was happening. Maybe you are a little further from the mic.
Yes.
Yes, just repeat what it is.
The subject is Piloting of Center of Excellence Model and Leadership Implementation.
and from which firm is that document?
It's from Prodigy.
This is the same project. And that's addressed to whom?
To Tiro and Mpefu.
And who is Tiro?
It is myself.
Did you see this document at the time it was, about the time it was sent?
Yes.
What does that document say?
If I recall, I'm going to read it.
Yes, yes.
But
No. Sorry, what does the inscription say?
The inscription, should I read it?
Yes.
It says, Tiro Mpefu. The proposal from Prodigy is accepted. We should enter into a partnership with Prodigy Business, I think it's Solutions, Property Limited. We need a formal MOU, I think it's to this effect. Please prepare a letter for my signature in accordance, I can't read this, my signature.
Receipt. Is that not receipt and confirm
Signature.
our acceptance of the proposal from Prodigy?
Yes. I just couldn't see that signature and receipt and
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it says, Chair.
All right. Now, there is a signature there. Whose signature is that?
It is Mr. Montana's signature.
And whose handwriting is that?
It is Mr. Montana's handwriting.
Now,
There's a date appearing there, but the year doesn't appear.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's
almost-
10/6. What would be have been the
I think
year?
it would be 2010, Chair.
So it was the same date as the date of the letter from Prodigy.
It looks like it, yes.
The letter is addressed to Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, care of Mr. Tsepo L. Montana, is that right?
Yes, Chair.
And it's from N. Shanmugam.
Yes, Chair.
and as the chairperson has pointed out, that acceptance is made on the very same day that the proposal is dated.
Yes, Chair.
Now, is that what gave birth to a series of Prodigy contracts? There will be evidence about that. I'm just asking you to the best of your knowledge.
Yes, that's exactly what.
Chairperson, I just want to point out that Mr. Dingiswayo will deal with that when he comes to testify.
Yes, okay.
And of course, he will deal with the issues relating to the resistance to payment.
Okay.
Now, coming back to another matter you raise in your affidavit.
I see we are at 1, but if we are not going to take long, we could try and finish with him so that after lunch we deal with the next witness. But it depends how long you think he will still be.
Chairman, may I be guided by you? The parts I want to refer the witness to is where he says, I have read the affidavit of Mr. Ngoi, and I confirm what's there. It would be unfair both to you and the witness to say, well, do you confirm it? So I'll have to take him to that. It will take a few minutes, but more importantly, if you look at paragraph 7, Chairman, I want to deal with the manner in which Mr. Montana dealt with Mr. Holele at different times.
But how much time do you think
It would take, I would say, at least 20 minutes.
Okay, no, I think if it's going to take 20 minutes, let's rather take the lunch adjournment, and then you can continue at 2. Yes. We'll take the lunch adjournment now, and we will resume at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.
You think so? Yeah, for the next 8 days. But that helps. Good, fine, good. I just wanted